Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Dr. Roberta Rincon. She is the Associate Director of Research at the Society of Women Engineers. What really made me want to speak to her is her title. Really is why does an engineering society need a director of research? What is she researching? What is this research used for? And how do you disseminate this research? So many questions. So I suppose we could just jump right into it. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Dr. Rincon.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
From the bit of research I did on you, besides knowing your title, I know that you studied civil engineering in school. What motivated you to study civil engineering?
That's a great question, and it's kind of a hard one because I'm not quite sure. When I was in high school, I was very good at math. I'm very good at science, and I had a friend who was interested, who actually had a crush on the drafting instructor my senior year, and she convinced me to take drafting and drafting with her. So I went ahead and did that. And, as a senior, kind of thinking about what do I want to do in college? Of course, architecture, sort of, drafting architecture. I didn't feel that I was very artistically inclined. So engineering was something that sort of came up. And I thought, well, I'll give this a shot. And I know engineers make good money, and that was also something that was very important to me because I did not grow up with a very privileged background. So I wanted something that would allow me a level of financial independence. And so that's where I ended up. And I started out in civil engineering at the University of Texas at Austin, and I ended up sticking with it, which is I think maybe not as common as you would think. I know that a lot of college students change their major quite often, and I did think about changing my major, but I ended up staying with it because it actually is extremely interesting and very there's a lot you can do in civil engineering, whether it's hydraulics or environmental or structural. I ended up in highway design, transportation.
I also saw that you got a MBA as well. So what was the motivation to get that degree?
I did. So I worked in highway design for a few years after graduating, and I felt that I wanted to make a career change. Um, Honestly, as I've been working with the Society of Women Engineers now for almost 7 years. And when I started here, I hadn't been a practicing engineer for a while. And so I I think that as I was doing this research with the Society of Women Engineers, I realized why I left engineering. And it really was because of feeling lonely, feeling isolated, some of those feelings in engineering that women and those who are um, sort of underrepresented in the profession feel. I was feeling that. And so I was looking for sort of a change. Looking back, I wish that I had found organizations like the Society of Women Engineers, like the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, to sort of help me feel like I wasn't alone. But I ended up going back to school to make that career change. And I felt that an MBA was something that could help build upon what I had already done. And it really did. It opened up some new doors for me.
But you weren't done there. Dr. Rincon, you must really like school because you ended up getting a PhD in educational policy and planning. So I've never heard of educational policy and planning. So what did that entail, and what was the motivation to get that degree?
I ended up, after getting my MBA, I ended up in higher education administration. I worked for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, which is the sort of the governing body for higher education in the state of Texas. And after working there a few years, I ended up working in academic affairs. which is sort of getting away from sort of the engineering side of things, working more with student success, um, and degree programs and such, research funding. And as working in higher education, you realize that if you want to advance, you need a terminal degree. And so I was looking for something that aligned with my interests and my career goals, and would allow me some flexibility, because I was working full time, I had a family, and I needed something that would allow me to take classes when I could. And there are very few doctoral programs that will allow you to do that. So educational policy and planning is one that, I have no regrets about doing that particular degree, because it was something that introduced me to what sort of causes these inequities that we see in education. And specifically now, the work that I'm doing with SWE education in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and math, I have a greater understanding of those inequities because of what I learned in my doctoral program.
So now you have a degree in civil engineering, you have an MBA, and you have a PhD in educational policy and planning. How did those 3 degrees help you in the work that you do now?
How did the degrees help me in the work that I do now? It's amazing how the job that I do right now combines all of that, because my engineering background, I understand the path and the issues and the challenges that engineering students and those in the workforce, engineers in the workforce, face, because I've faced them. I've done that. I've gone that path. The MBA gives me more of the financial understanding, business background. And so working with numbers, working with dollars, understanding budgets, those are really, really what I think the MBA has brought me. And then the educational policy and planning is where the inequities and understanding how to evaluate social science research, because that's a lot of what I do right now is the surveys, the interviews, the case studies, being able to read these articles in all of these different journals and understand them and sort of make sense of them and be able to share that with a maybe non-technical audiences or technical audiences who maybe are not as comfortable or familiar with the social science. That background all sort of combined has helped me to really, really, I think it's just been really beneficial in the current position that I hold.
You mentioned when you were an engineer that you felt isolated.
Mm-hmm.
What could the company have, or the company or companies, what could they have done to, I guess, alleviate that isolation for you?
That's a great question. A lot of it, I think, has to do with the fact that, I worked in 2 different places after graduating with my degree. And in both places, I was the only female engineer. And that was hard. I think, we need to diversify the engineering profession. We need more women in engineering, and organizations can help with that in, better recruitment and retention of women, so that we can see more diversity in the profession. Until we feel, I believe that there's research that shows that it's about like 30%. If you can reach that 30% threshold, then you're less inclined to have individuals feel that they are sort of like the only. It gets a little more complicated when you start talking about intersectional identity. So not just women or engineers of color, but women engineers of color can often feel that they are even more alone, because they don't necessarily feel that they are included or feel a sense of belonging when they are when you feel like that, like there's nobody who really understands, that you really feel connected to. And so what my particular organizations could have done, probably more hiring more women, hiring more individuals so that that are, at the time, this was 30 years ago. There are more women, a bit more women now, but the numbers are still low. In some cases, for example, like with mechanical engineering. Mechanical engineering is the most popular degree program in engineering. So there are a lot of women who are graduating with mechanical engineering degrees, but they are still only about like less than 10% of the working engineers in mechanical engineering. So it's really, really hard to feel that you have, to find others that you can connect with if you are really that underrepresented in the profession.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the work that you do with the Society of Women Engineers as an associate director of research, what exactly does that entail?
So the work that I do is really around providing information and data to our members, to leaders in the engineering, in industry, to policymakers, pointing out that these issues exist, because that's step one, recognizing that there's a problem that needs to be addressed. And for those who understand that there's a problem, helping to give them the tools and resources that they need to make the changes that need to be made to create a more welcoming and inclusive environment in engineering. So it's really around taking, for the most part, taking all the great research that's happening out there, because there's a lot of great researchers who are working on these issues, bringing that to the attention of those who are practicing engineers and in positions of power, who can make those changes happen, and make sure that those changes that are implemented are sort of data-driven, research-driven, right?
What you mentioned that I think you said it was 30% of women are in engineering. So what do you think the number should be?
It actually is less than that. 30% was sort of like the threshold from what I've read, that, if you can get sort of like a 30%, it's sort of like a level of saturation where you feel a bit more of a level of inclusivity. The actual number of women in engineering is more like 14%. It's very, very low. What would we like? 50-50. That's what we would like. But we would like the engineering profession to reflect the population as a whole. That would be the ideal. We are very, very far from reaching that.
Right. I guess for something like that to happen, it's because as it stands now, a lot of men go into engineering. For it to get close to that 50-50, wouldn't it mean that close to 50% of people going into engineering be women as well?
Yeah, you would. It is sort of an issue that goes all the way back to, I mean, there's research that shows that as young as like 5-6 years old, there are these gender stereotypes about, who is good at math. Boys are better at math than girls, those kinds of ideas. The influence of parents, of teachers in perpetuating those stereotypes, peers, how comfortable are middle school and high school girls in showing that they are good at math and science, that they are interested in engineering. And the peer influence is strong when you think about in the media, and who you see as engineers and scientists. All of these influences are affecting our ability to really diversify the profession, and that, that starts young. The number of students, the number of women who are earning engineering degrees is only 22% of all engineering degrees earned are earned by women. So if we can't increase the number of girls entering engineering degree programs, we're not going to see the graduation rates go up. We're not going to see more engineers in the workforce. So it starts early. This is a problem that's going to take decades. And we have been working on it for decades. But back in the 1950s, there were only about 1% of working engineers who were women. Now we're at about 14%. So it has improved, but that rate, it's going to take us a very, very long time to reach parity.
Oh, yeah, it certainly sounds so. I mean, a lot of the issues that you mentioned, especially the one that stood out to me is, even you mentioned is a big one, is the peer influence on them going into engineering. So I'm kind of at a loss for words as to even what you would do in such a case where your friends or the people around you, your peers, are the ones maybe discouraging you or not encouraging you to do engineering, or maybe they think it's weird that you're going into a class of all the boys and not sticking with them. It's like, how do you break that cycle?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's not just girls. I mean, it's also boys, changing the way boys think about who belongs, right? There's research that shows that in a team environment, what often happens is that girls are given some of the less technical tasks on the team. So, you take the notes. They don't get to play with the equipment. So as teachers, making sure that, when you bring those teams together, that there's equal time for students to play, right? To participate, making sure that for SWE, the Society of Women Engineers, we have these organizations, these clubs called SWENEX, and they're K-12 memberships, free for students, to try and bring some of these girls together so that they are with students who share their interest. And I think that can really, really make a difference, right? So making sure that that they're encouraged, that their interest is encouraged, and that encouragement continues all the way through middle school, high school, into college, and into career.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even in that instance where you mentioned the girls are asked to take the notes as opposed to play with the technical parts of a project, they just have to be the ones to say, no, actually, I want to do the technical part. You take the notes. How about that?
Right. Yeah. And being confident enough and having, knowing that the teacher has your back, that others have your back. Because if we can change the attitudes of boys as well, right? Boys, change the attitude of boys. And I feel confident. I feel optimistic that we're seeing a lot of change happen right now as far as what is acceptable for gender roles, right? Like we want to encourage more men to take paternity leave. Those kinds of things, stay-at-home dads, and being more equitable when it comes to the household chores, those things. We see more of that happening. And as we see more of that happening, I think we're going to see this change happen that we want to see.
Dr. Rincon, when I first started this podcast, it was about my own, it really stemmed from my own struggles giving presentations in front of management when I worked as an engineer. And I got a lot better at it over time because I saw the benefit of doing so. For just the career that you have faced, that you've gone down, so far, when did you notice, or when did you realize the benefit of getting better, or even just speaking in front of others, how that could be a benefit to you?
So in high school, I never once made a presentation. I didn't have to make a presentation until I was a senior in college. My capstone project, and it was a group project, and we had designed a rest area, And so I was tasked with making the presentation about the design of the parking lot for that rest area. So I stood up in front of about 20 classmates to make this presentation, and I froze. I literally froze. I was so scared. One of my team members was mouthing to me what I needed to say. It was bad. It was very, very bad. Get out into the workforce. I'm thinking, okay, I got that behind me. I get out into the workforce. In my first job, the office lead, the head of the office, wanted us to share about our projects, the projects that we were working on, share with our coworkers. And so I had to stand up and talk about the project that I was working on. Friendly group, right? I mean, they're people that I work with, they're people that I know. Same thing happened. I froze. I was terrified, and somebody laughed. And that was when I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I have to do something to change. Like, I have to overcome this fear. And so I went to Toastmasters. I didn't even go to Toastmasters. I went to like baby step Toastmasters. I was so scared to do it. So I did like a community college class that was an intro to Toastmasters. And then I went and I joined Toastmasters to try and overcome this fear. And I knew that, the work that I do is important, and I need to be able to share it with other people. If I can't speak in a, front of a group, how am I going to do that? How am I going to be successful in my career if I can't speak to people? Friendly people, I forget about speaking to people that I don't know. So, yeah, that's what did it for me. And then going back to grad school, I had to make a lot of presentations. So all of that, but that's where it started.
Yeah, oh well, it was a kind of jerky move for that person to laugh.
Gosh, it was awful. It was absolutely awful. I know you like cringe thinking about it, but it was just terrible, awful.
But I'm glad that you eventually saw the benefit of it as well. Just you're right. It's very difficult to even move up within an organization if you're not able to communicate. Well, communicate your value to the organization is one thing, but just communicate the things that you're working on. And because how else are people supposed to know? It's like you're the one that knows, and if you're not communicating it, how's anyone supposed to figure it out?
Aspect of your work, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so when it comes to the presentations that you do now, do you have a process for putting them together? And if so, what is it?
It sort of depends on the presentation. So if I'm going to make, say, a presentation at a conference, what I tend to do is I know what I want to talk about. I put together like an outline, the topics that I want to cover, and then I put my slides together, and then I practice it. I run through it, and I realize every single time that I am twice as long as I need at the time allotted to me. So I go back and I sort of like bring things down, and I make it, to where it will work within the time allotted. What I typically do is I don't put together a script. I put together like bullet points. I know what I want to say for each of these slides, and I let it flow. I've done to where I've put together a script. It doesn't work very well for me to read what I'm going to say, what I want to say. But if I have bullet points, it flows a bit better. So that's sort of my process.
I commend you. Actually, forget commend. I thank you for practicing your presentations so that they finish within time. God knows how many conferences I've been to where I'm looking at the agenda. This person had 15 minutes to talk. Why 20 minutes in, this person's still talking? He just throws the entire agenda off, and now lunch is starting late, and I'm mad, and because I'm hangry. Because this whole thing is, I was supposed to eat already. I'm on a schedule. Damn it! I had breakfast at 8. 12 was supposed to be lunch. Now they talk about 12:15 is lunch. No, I'm mad. I'm mad for 15 minutes. It's so annoying when people do that.
It is.
it's disrespectful to the audience too when it really comes down
Absolutely.
to it. When you were told how much time you had, but it's like, I don't care. I'm going to go over anyway because I'm me. Like, who the hell are you?
Is that me?
Yeah, and I really like your point about not having a script and working off of bullets as well. And I suspect that when you practice, you're practicing so that you make sure that you hit all the bullets that you want in the time that you're allotted. I firmly believe that reading or just trying to memorize something isn't the way to go, because in the event that you forget something when it's time to actually give the presentation, then you might freeze like you used to when you were in high school, or when you were in college, when you started
All
working.
flustered. Yeah,
Yeah, because like, oh
absolutely.
crap, I missed that word. Where am I now? And then you fall into a tailspin, and there's no friend to help you to mouth out the words to you when you're giving your presentation. There's no one, it's just you. So I firmly am a fan of bullets and of practicing presentations too. I think that's great. Do you ever get nervous before giving a presentation? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
I get nervous before every single presentation. I have come to accept that I'm just going to get nervous. And one problem that I have, and it's not all the time, but I blush when like I get flushed, right? And so it's visible to the audience that I am nervous. But I have accepted that that is sometimes going to happen, and I just have to work through that. And so with practice, I have done that. I mean, it's just I am an introvert. I am not comfortable in that, the big speaking out. I may never ever be comfortable. I've been speaking in front of people for, many, many years now, and it still happens. But it's going to happen. The alternative is not making the presentation, and that is not an acceptable alternative to me. So I've adapted.
Yeah, for me, it's sweating. So I remember when I first started giving presentations, it was like I just jumped out the shower. It was gross. It was pouring everywhere. I didn't even. I should have practiced. But when I first started giving those presentations, I was so arrogant. I thought I could just get up there and just read slides and get out of there as quickly as possible. But I never got out of there as quickly as possible, because oftentimes what would happen is I get questions after the presentation that I thought I had answered during it. So now I was sweating before and during the presentation, and now afterwards I'm getting these questions. Oh, now it's just dripping everywhere. So now my hack is that I wear sweaters. So if you're a sweater, wear a sweater. Yeah, you can't see the pit stains when you put the sweater on. Yeah. Blushing has never been my issue. I think for rather obvious reasons. I don't have the skin for it, but I can certainly see how that could be an issue for others. When it comes to giving presentations, just public speaking in general, for the people who are listening or watching our conversation, what would your number one tip be for them to become more effective at it?
I think just accepting that you're going to be uncomfortable. Like, you may get more comfortable if you're lucky, to where you're not sweating profusely, or you're not blushing, and it comes more naturally. But for me, it's getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's just going to happen, and you're going to get through it, and it's going to be fine. But accept that, and don't be afraid of that, because that's how you grow. That's how it's if you really want to move forward, you're going to have to kind of just push forward through that level of uncomfortableness, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. That's what what's the worst that's going to happen? What's the worst that can happen? So I get a little flushy, and people know I'm nervous. So what? So what?
Yeah.
That they're not up here, and they're probably more scared to be up there than I am.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point, Dr. Rincon. Especially if someone wants to give you a hard time afterwards. Well, you were blushing a whole lot. You know what? I'm gonna be in the first row when it comes time for you to give a presentation, and I'm gonna nitpick everything that you did that was wrong. How about that?
Yeah, and make sure that your content is good, because if you're delivering them, they're going to pay attention to what you're saying. That little distraction of being nervous instead, It's nothing. The content is what's important.
I firmly agree with you. I mean, you could be up there and be the best speaker ever. In fact, I was at a conference earlier this year, or well, not early this year, but this past summer, and they were great speakers. But if you were to ask me afterward, what did they talk about? I have no clue. But I knew they moved around the stage a lot. I knew they used their hand gestures a lot. They used a lot of vocal variety, all the things you learn about in Toastmasters, actually. But what was the content of their speech?
Yeah.
I do not remember at all.
Exactly. The content is important.
Content is key. 100%. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
You can reach me at my email address, roberta.rincon, Rincon at swe.org. You can also look me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek. You can learn more about it at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Dr. Rincon.
Thank you.